Good evening. My name is John Milburn. I'm your course coordinator. Welcome to LAWS 11046, which is Law and the Environment. And this is week number 1 in term 1 of 2015. For those of you who want to join us live, and I encourage you to do so, just remember that the sessions are conducted on a Wednesday evening, 6:45 p.m, and you will need to download Zoom first. If you do attend the session, then be aware that it's being recorded for educational purposes and your attendance will be deemed as your consent to participate in the sessions. And one of the reasons I've suggested that it's good to join the session live is that you have an opportunity to ask any questions and you interact in a more meaningful way. So we have a number of people on the line already, so thank you very much for joining us live. And if there are any questions, those who are online at the moment, you can simply unmute your microphones, ask a question or make a comment, or use the chat facility, which you'll find in Zoom. Now, I have provided some of the comments already through various notes and also through various YouTube videos. So do have a chance, or do have a look at those videos, and I won't repeat myself in relation to these sessions tonight. The sessions are generally live, more like a tutorial than a lecture, so keep that in mind. The thing that I do want you to do, and hello Tanya, welcome along, is consider what your objective is at the end of the course and work backwards. By that I mean your preparation for exam starts now. If it were me in your position, the first thing I'd probably do is flick through the text and get a really good feel for it. So don't get bogged down in too much detailed reading at this stage. Flick through it all, get a feel for it, and start to, I don't know, I use a highlighter. So if that suits you as a study technique, then perhaps you can start doing that. But when you do highlight, can I just suggest this to you, particularly on a big text like Bates, which is the prescribed text. When you highlight, don't just highlight chunks of material. Highlight so that you are very selective, and what you highlight can actually form a sentence in its own right. And the reason for that is that when you're under stress in an exam situation, for example, you don't want to have to be reinterpreting the clause or the paragraph once again. That's your opportunity to do that is during the study sessions. So you might think that a particular phrase which represents an exemption or an exception to the rule isn't worthy of highlighting, so just highlight the general rule. And that might mean that you've got a few words on line 1, a word or two on line 2, and then a sentence or so on line 4, which when read in conjunction with each other makes sense. And that will provide you with a summary. So I would do that. I'd also look at the past exam papers. That will give you a really good feel for, I suppose, the focus that I have in mind for this course. Now, I took this course last year, so if I was going to concentrate on any exam, I would concentrate on the exam from 2014 as probably a good guide as to the way that at least I think, and of course I'll be writing the exam and marking the exam. I will give you plenty of exam hints on the way through, so please keep an eye out or an ear out for those as we progress. This week's hint is I would like you to have a good understanding of the concept of the separation of powers. It's really quite relevant in the environmental law context in the sense that Parliament makes the laws, the executive, the government if you like, administers the laws, and the judiciary, the third branch in the separation of powers, will interpret the laws and make judicial decisions based around those. The distinction between the judiciary and the other two branches is reasonably clear-cut because the judiciary attempt very strongly to ensure that their branch of the law is kept as separate as possible from the other two. But you'll see in your reading that there is a bit of a merger between the Parliament and the executive. So, for example, ministers who head the executive branch of government are also members of Parliament. So there is a crossover there. And there's another crossover in the sense that Parliament, it has as its primary role the task of enacting legislation, laws if you like, statutes, but sometimes that power is actually delegated through delegated legislation to the executive, and the executive is the government, if you like, that implements and administers the law and enforces the law by bringing actions to a court. So there is this somewhat of a merged area in parts between Parliament and the executive, and you just need to be aware of that and understand the interplay between the two. All right, so that's an exam hint for this week. In your communications, I'd like you to try to be as succinct as you can. One valuable tip, I think, is keep your sentences quite short. Do avoid a situation of a long, complicated, rambling sentence or way of communication. And you may have had a look at my video in relation to the focus of the course, Thinking Like a Lawyer and Study of Law, where I provide a comparison of two ways to say something. One is the very long-winded explanation, and the other is the short, sharp way to say something. And quite often it's more difficult to communicate using short, sharp principles or techniques rather than the long, rambling technique. So do keep that in mind. Try and avoid legalese or gobbledygook, as I call it, and I will mark you advantageously accordingly. All right, you probably saw some of my background. I do a number of things. University is one of those things, but because I am involved in court proceedings, either as an advocate or hearing matters almost on a daily basis, a lot of the focus of the course from my perspective will be practical. It will be, and this will disappoint a lot of you because you'll say that's not really what we're doing this course for, but it will be focused as if you are a lawyer. Now, I know many of you aren't necessarily aspiring to be a lawyer or studying a law degree, but the course is a law course but built in a different way. So it will be done from a legal rather than an economic perspective, and that's why I say the study guides, as excellent as they are not as relevant for this course as might otherwise be the case. So I'll be asking you to consider what it would be like from a legal perspective. Now, with the presentation of your assignment work and also your exam work to a lesser degree, I would encourage you to consider my sample document. You've probably had a look at that already. There's no magic in that document. It's not the only way to do things. It's certainly not the best way to do things. People will come up with better designs, better way of setting out their papers. But there are a few things that I want you to take from that. That is, make sure that your paper is presented in a consistent fashion, whatever that might be. If you present your assignment and you've got different fonts and you've got different font sizes, then it says to me you've probably cut this and pasted it from somewhere, and it's a bit of a giveaway. So professionalism in the way in which you present your work is, from my perspective, quite important. Remember, I'm looking at this as if you are writing legal paperwork. And if you're charging $400 an hour as a lawyer, people expect that you can at least present something which is in a professional manner. So do try very hard to look at your presentation carefully and read the document, read the content. It's not just filled for the sake of showing you how a paper should be presented. It's actually got some substance to it as well. So I'd encourage you to do that. Now, many of you have already registered for UCrew. Thank you for doing that. I'd like to see most of the interaction involving students occur in UCrew. Moodle is great, and I will allow you to, upload material through Moodle, maybe ask some questions in a forum type context, but mostly I would like it done through UCrew. And I think if people start to use that facility consistently, you'll get the most from it. Certainly I encourage the use of study groups, and I think that's a great way to learn. The course does require you to reference material. Now, officially for this course, it's Harvard-style referencing. That's not what we use in the law school. In the law school, we use the Australian Guide to Legal Citation. So I'm happy to accept either of those. Harvard is what is suggested in the course, but my preference is Australian Guide to Legal Citation. So you'll see a lot of legal type influence coming through in this course. All right, I've suggested that you need to try and cover everything at once in some ways. And I know that's difficult to get your head around, but it comes back to that first point that I made. Do try to get the big picture first. Don't get bogged down in too much detail initially. Try and work backwards. Think about what might be on the exam. Have a look at the exam that I wrote last year as a guide. Have a look at the text and start to go it through. You know, I would go through it fairly quickly first up and then go back with more detailed rereading later. But also in terms of the assignments, if you haven't looked at the assignments, then I'd urge you to do that now and start preparing your mind in terms of answering those assignments even in week one. So don't just restrict yourself to looking at the first one. Look at them all, work backwards and try to picture how you might go about setting out your work timetable to suit. Now, can I just ask, and I will ask participants to be a little interactive here. You can do that by either unmuting and providing comment or using the chat facility. I am not sure if you're able to access two things from the Moodle site. I can from my end, but I just want to make sure that you can from your end. The first is the assignments. Now, have you been able to access the assignments through Moodle? So use the chat facility or just tell me live. We're all getting used to Zoom, aren't we?
I'm just double checking that on Moodle now.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Has anyone had a look at the assignments? All right, well, that'll be the first thing that we do tonight. Check out those assignments. And hello to
I've just gone into the assignment one link in the left-hand assessment bar, and all the information's come up, no problem, with the submission option.
All right. So it all looks to be there, Michelle? That's great. Thank you very much. Now, if anyone has a problem accessing the assignments, please let me know straight away, because as I've indicated in tonight's tutorial, if you like, I do expect that everyone will look at that in week one for all the assignments and work backwards. Now, the other thing is I just want to make sure that people are able to access UCrew. I had some difficulty initially in accessing UCrew via Moodle, but I had to take away some security settings that were blocking it. Now, in Moodle, left-hand side, there should be the link to UCrew. I trust people have tried that, and I'm just looking for feedback as to whether that link works for everyone. Any comments? Okay, Michelle said that worked fine. Anyone have any problems with that? Great. This is the first, I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity to use UCrew in one of the very first streams, and I'm a big fan and promoter of UCrew, I guess it's fair to say. And in that regard, we had to use it entirely separately. So this is the first year where it's integrated, and the feedback that I'm getting through the chat facility is that it's working fine. So that's great. All right, now, week one, I'm going to announce my challenge to any student that wants to take me on in the typing test. Has anyone had a look at my video in relation to typing speed? The use of, I called it using Dragon voice recognition software. Have a look at that, and I've given a little demo. If you think that you can beat it, please, I do this every year. I invite someone to challenge me in a typing test. We'll do that in week 12, and it'll only be a paragraph, so start practicing. If you're not too confident about your typing skills, then do consider getting some voice recognition software. Have a look at the videos that I've uploaded on Moodle and give it some thought. One of the advantages, and I do mention this in the tape, of using voice recognition software is that you must think about what you want to say before you've said it. Now, many people that do use typing, and they're probably fabulously quick typists, they say, oh, look, I want to be able to see it on paper first. If you're using voice recognition software, you're killing two birds with one stone. You're practicing your advocacy skills as well as getting something on paper at the same time. So do think about that. Now, I hope by now you've all had a chance to consider the various websites that are critically important to doing this course well. There is, of course, the text, and I've said how much I like that text. But when you need to access legislation, there are different types of websites that you can use. I actually quite like the unauthorised OSTLY. That's the one I go to most of the time. I say it's unauthorised because there are authorised sites which are, if you like, recognised as being 100% up to date or 100% accurate. But sometimes there's a delay in legislation changes being made in various sites, and sometimes you may need to go to both, but generally speaking, I think OSTLY, it's unauthorised but very popular. And it's got some really good functions. Have a look at the Note Up function. Now, this is all mentioned in one of my Zoom videos, Zoom video called, I think, Environmental Law, John Milburn, Resources and Research Skills. It's a 24-minute video. I won't repeat all that. Do have a look at it. And in that, I've made reference to where you should find the law up to date in relation to environmental law, what are the main pieces of legislation, and how you access and use the websites. But have a look at OSTLY, and particularly learn how to use that Note Up function search. It's great. Another one that you might be interested in, and this is if you want to get a 7 in this subject, one way that you can really impress, in this case me, but generally, is if you subscribe to a thing called Barnet Jade, you have an option of asking for daily updates to be sent to your phone or your computer or your tablet in relation to the area of law of your choice. So if you want to know if there was a decision of the Planning and Environment Court yesterday, then tomorrow, or then today, Barnet Jade will send you an email saying you might be interested in this case, which was handed down yesterday. So it's a great way of keeping right up to date in terms of law. And the good thing is that OSTLY is free and Barnet Jade is free. All you have to do is subscribe. All right. Are there any questions so far? I'm looking at the chat facility. Nothing coming through on that regard. Does anyone wish to make any comments? Has everyone been able to find the exam from last year? I think I uploaded it. But if not, right, we've got that. We've had a look at it. And we'll try and give you some hints as we go through. Now, do have a look at the video which is called Planning and Environment, Week 1, Introduction to Planning and Environment Law, Bates Chapter 1. It goes for about 9 minutes. And if you like, it's my take on what I think is important in Chapter 1 of Bates. Now, I propose to do this each week. I won't recover the material necessarily live in the live session. It's something for you to look at your leisure. You don't have to look at it because primarily it's me, if you like, paraphrasing and summarising what's in Bates. I do add my own commentary and opinions, which might be useful to you. But as you'll see in that video, I essentially go through the chapter and indicate on the video what I think is the most important part. And that is reflective of what I said at the start of the lecture about the way in which I highlight. So just to give you an idea, this is the 8th edition. I'm looking at page 15. I'm looking at paragraph 1.25. I'll put it up to the screen and you'll see there I've highlighted various parts in yellow, and you'll see how I've selected various words from different lines. But if you read that, it will make sense in its own right, and that's the point I'm making. Now that's all that I've highlighted on that page. That's not to say the rest is not important, but that's what I thought was the most important part. So these Zoom sessions that I'll upload each week in relation to my commentary of Bates are designed to be the paraphrasing and summarising of the chapter from my perspective. Now, please don't assume that just because I've thought that that's the most important part, that that is the most important part. You may have different views. And that then brings me to another point with law. If you've come from a science background or a business background or an accounting background or something, some other discipline, you might be surprised, hopefully pleasantly, by this next comment. There's not necessarily going to be a right or wrong answer in law, which is great, because you can advance an argument which I think is wrong and still get full marks, get 100%, because I might be really impressed with the way you've advanced the argument. I might ultimately say, no, I disagree, but law is all about being persuasive. It's all about promoting your position in relation to a certain thing. And if you think about it, that gives you a great freedom. You're not going to be constrained by what you think I might want or expect as the answer. I'm much more interested in the way that you go about logically advancing your commentary in relation to the law. So you identify the law and you can then draw your conclusions from it. Now, if you think about it, coming into law, that has to be the case. There has to be difference of opinion. Two reasons for that. The first is we wouldn't have cases if it was all clear cut. If everyone could read the law and agree that in these particular circumstances, this is how the law would be applied, then why would you bother going to see a judge? So in most cases, you've got people that have received legal advice and they've decided to go to court anyway. And then it gets to a court and the court makes a decision. Now, if it was clear cut, that would be the end of it, but it's not, because many decisions of magistrates and judges at first instance are then subject to an appeal. And the appeal court may look at the decision based on the facts before it and say, no, we think that magistrate or that single judge is wrong, and overturn it on appeal. Now, cases go through to the High Court. You might have a High Court comprised of 7 judges, and you might have a split decision of 4-3, 4 leaning one way, 3 leaning the other way. And you could hardly suggest that the 3 judges in the High Court who were in the minority don't know what they're talking about. It's just that they take a different view. So try and take some comfort from that law is not necessarily going to be a right or wrong answer. You can have some fun with it. Okay. All right. Now, I have done a lot of talking. We don't have any questions coming through on the chat facility. I'm going to slow down so you can think of some questions if you want to ask. You can do that through the chat facility, or you can just come in live by unmuting the microphone and asking a question or making a comment. Does anyone wish to raise any issues or ask any questions? There's no pressure, you don't have to, just if you want to.
By the end of the term, would we have read the whole book? Or are we supposed to read a chapter a week? Or
I would really like you to go through the whole book. This will terrify you. I would really like you to make an attempt to at least flick through the whole book now, but I'll give you this tip. If you look at the way in which I've structured the course, you'll see that at various weeks you've got, do I have it in front of me? You might have 4 or 5 weeks of material. Now, if that's the case, we'll say week 7, environmental impact assessment, protection, etc. The most important part of week 9 is environmental impact assessment. I think that's chapter 7, but it might be chapter 10. And you can see that I've tossed in other chapters that I want you to read and consider, but you don't go into so much detail for those. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, we're not mind readers. How do we know which ones are the most important and which ones aren't? You'll get a feel for it the way I go through the course. The way the course is set out and also the past exam, and I will give you those hints as well. So, for example, if we look at week number 9, I want you to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 chapters for week 9. Well, what that tells me is that not a lot of it will be in detail. So you can flick through without going into a lot. There won't be a lot in the examination on protection of biodiversity. There will be some, and there is some work to do on native vegetation, but it won't be as important as other areas. So flick through it, get a feel for it, but don't get too bogged down on it. Certainly try and read the week's reading which has been allocated, and try and get 1 week ahead at least if you can. There's a lot of reading in this course. Thanks, Nicole. I hope that answers your question. Thanks, Anthony.
I've got a quick question about in regards to the module 1 for this week, the PDF. Can you hear me there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So it says to read chapter 1 of the textbook, which is fine. I just couldn't understand the course resources online. So it's got reading 1-1 for Turner and others.
Yeah.
94. Where do we acquire these online reading resources?
Okay, that's a really good question. Thank you. So you're making reference to the course profile.
Yes.
Yeah. Look, as I said, it's an excellent. Sorry, you're talking about the study guide.
Yeah, well, the PDF from the Dropbox for week 1, the environmental policy for module 1.
All right. Look, I will. I'll try and stress this. It's there, but it wasn't written by me, and it was written. It's very good, but it's a completely different focus. So don't be too concerned about what's in the study guide, and don't be too concerned about the links. I've just left it as it is for the moment. So don't be too concerned about following up on those. Is that okay?
All right. So just stick to the Bates reading mostly?
Mostly, yeah. You've got more than enough in Bates, and it's really good material, and it's up to date.
All right.
Supplement that by looking at case law and legislation online. So, yeah, look through the study guides, but I think you run a real risk, at least many students do, of getting bogged down in the study guide material. It's quite technical, and I'm trying to keep it relatively straightforward, relatively simple, and from a legal rather than economic perspective. So I hope that answers it. Thank you, Anthony. A great question. I really appreciate that.
That's all right.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, that's probably getting close to all that I wanted to talk about tonight. You understand that you've got the assignments and the exam. We've invited you to have a look at those things today. Certainly the assignments. Have a look at the last year's exam. And next week, I'd like you to do some work prior to the Zoom session. I want you to go through Moodle, get a feel for what's there, flick through the textbook by Jerry Bates, have a look at all the assessment pieces, upload, find out a way to upload your assessment, have a look at my sample document, register for Zoom, enrol a new crew, try and get some study groups going, map out your study plan, that's what I said at the start, work your way backwards, and have a look at accessing legislation and case law and work out whether you prefer OSPLE or the authorised sources, and keep up with your reading and stay in front. So for next week, you'll try and read chapters 1, 2 and 3 and gain an appreciation of separation of powers, gain an appreciation of the Australian legal system, and gain an appreciation of the principle of terra nullius, which is relevant to the Mabo decision. Okay, now share your material. It's good karma, and if you come across something that you think will be of help to your fellow students, go on Ucrew and share it with everyone, and we'd really appreciate it. Okay, well, I know I've talked a lot tonight, and I hope that I haven't put you off. I really do mean for you to have fun with this subject. Don't get too bogged down with it. if you can learn the basics, if you can understand the basic principles, then you'll pass the subject. And if you want to go for gold, great. But don't be too bogged down on chapter 1 and you think, I can't get away from this, it's too hard. We'll get there. All right, so no questions, no comments. I might stop the recording now, unless someone's diving to their keyboard. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.